So, at the end of Battle for Azeroth, we found out that Sylvanas was working for the Jailer and that she manipulated us all. But as there are some recent spoilers, we've learned more about the actual details of her plan from the perspective of the Jailer. So, why did this mysterious entity of the Maw choose Sylvanas as his agent, and what was her actual plan all along? Brought to you by Gamivo.com. Make sure to click the link in the description and get Shadowlands as well as game time at discounted prices. Sylvanas is quite a tragic character. She fell as she defended Quotalas from the Scourge, was enslaved by Arthas, and subsequently freed herself. From that point forward, she created the Forsaken, and her only goal was to put an end to the Lich King. However, as Arthas was defeated, she saw no purpose in her undead life anymore, so she threw herself off the Frozen Throne to end her existence. At that point, she felt this endless void, which we know now as the Maw. In the Edge of Night story, we've learned that the val'kyr have saved her from this place and that she created a pact to return to the realm of the living, and then she did everything to avoid going back to that place, or at least that is what we initially thought. Now, from this point, we know that this is a gross oversimplification, as it is highly likely that this was when she first met the Jailer, and he was the one that she made a pact with. It wasn't just the val'kyr, they aren't a separate entity. Most recent spoilers from the Collector's Edition art book reveal quite some interesting bits of information. First, we learned that yes, it was indeed the Jailer that created the Lich King, but as Arthas fell, Bolvar took place, and he did his absolute best to contain this ancient evil from attacking the mortal plane, and he had contained it for years. Now, it is said that the Jailer was the one who sent the val'kyr to Sylvanas to serve as her tetherers to mortality and to return beyond the veil, which means that she was returned back to life. Then, he gave her a mission, and that is to claim the crown of the False King, the False King obviously being Bolvar. So it seems from this information that Bolvar literally interfered in this plan of titanic proportions and held back for quite some time, and the Jailer found Sylvanas to be the perfect agent to remove this stone from blocking the Shadowlands. Why he chose her exactly is uncertain, most likely due to her being a broken soul and knowing how dedicated she was. Sylvanas obviously did everything in her power to defeat Arthas, so he probably wanted to channel that vengeance for his own purpose. Now, while the Jailer is insanely powerful in his own realm, he had very little influence on Azeroth, so he needed to set things in order for him to be able to project that power into the material plane. It is a similar mechanism to how the Lich King initially worked. At first, he was placed in Northrend and was incredibly weak, but he slowly conquered one race after the other, amassed an army of undead, and then he became one of the most powerful entities on all of Azeroth. The Jailer is very much the same. Now, in order for him to gain more influence, he needed as many soul anima as he can get, so while working to break the Arbiter and to channel the souls directly into the Maw, he also tasked Sylvanas on creating as much death and chaos as possible in order to empower himself. Now, we are certain that Sylvanas has been working on this plan since the Cataclysm essentially, and that really explains why she was so keen on creating that plague, destroying Gilneas, and was just going way too overboard. Since the Cataclysm, everyone was confused as to why Sylvanas was so ruthless. I mean, everyone else is on Azeroth as well, as there are wars constantly, but Sylvanas was going kinda crazy all of a sudden, which is now obviously explained as this was the plan all along, a plan forged by a much more powerful entity. Now, as the machine of death broke, most likely sometime during Legion, that is exactly when the Battle for Azeroth was set in motion, and that entire gigantic war, which happened all of a sudden, like, she literally burned an entire capital, which was done obviously for the Jailer. I think even Garrosh would find that to be way too much, even though he mana bombed Terramore. With the Arbiter no longer blocking the path, the Jailer got an incredible infusion of anima, and he was able to empower his agent even more, which explains why at the end of Battle for Azeroth, Sylvanas was suddenly so insanely powerful. She dealt with Saurfang like it was nothing, and now after all these years, she was finally powerful enough to face off against Bolvar and to break the helm of domination. This now explains why Sylvanas was able to toy around with the Lich King, as she has prepared this for years. Now, what her ultimate ultimate goal is, we don't really know. When you think about it, it is quite obvious that Sylvanas is also a victim in all of this, as we know the jailer created the Lich King and the undead, and it was the agent of Ner'zhul that raised Sylvanas and that forced this undead fate on her. So through a long chain of events, she was essentially enslaved by the jailer, freed herself, and then became his servant once again. Not really as a slave, but more of as a partner, at least from what we can see at this point. Honestly, I really hope they don't do that and Sylvanas was played around all along and she wasn't evil, as well this would be a cool plot twist as it is explained by all this new information. It would also really cheapen the story, and I feel like they would just milk Sylvanas' character as much as humanly possible. I really wouldn't want her to be redeemed. However, with this new information, it is now dead obvious that the jailer has been behind the scenes even since Warcraft 3. Sylvanas has been working for him since the fall of Arthas, but what her ultimate goal is within the Shadowlands, we are yet to find out. Thank you for watching. Check out whether Azeroth was right to purge Stratholme by clicking on the screen, and also check out Doronsmovies Academy for videos on real-world history and science. See you next time.